Coming up next is a session to share the role of the B Corp framework in assessing a company's ESG performance in a standardized and transparent way based on actual evidence of what they really do instead of what they say they do. Please do join me to welcome Dorothy Lam, co-founder and chief catalyst of Dream Impact, a Hong Kong-based fund manager and a certified B Corp professional, as well as our moderator, Per Dahlberg, co-founder of B Purpose Bureau.
Okay, welcome to our session here today. We're here to talk a bit about the B Corp assessment, and the title is B Corp Assessment Evaluating ESG and Beyond. My name is Per Dahlberg. I'm the co-founder, one of the co-founders of a company called B Purpose Bureau. We're an impact consultancy firm here in Hong Kong. We have specialized on using the B Corp framework to help companies become purpose-driven, impact-aware and stakeholder-focused. And I'm joined here today by Dorothy Lam, and I'm pleased to have you here.
My pleasure.
Good to talk about this. Dorothy is the co-founder of Dream Impact, which is a Hong Kong-based impact investment platform, which was founded 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And you started out first as a co-working space, and then developed into an entire social impact investing ecosystem. You have about how many companies today?
80.
80 companies today. And you also work as an intermediary matching between investors and these early stage companies.
Yes.
Good. So as we said, we're here to talk about ESG and beyond, really, because what we want to talk about is impact,
yes,
which makes a difference. And we want to put in that context the B Corp framework as a tool for investors. And of course, this is because we, on one hand, see that there's a market uptake for companies that work more with a purpose and need to prove that they are really purposeful businesses. And this is where you have companies that are certifying as B corporations, because it's one of the only, if not the only company, only framework that really assesses a company's whole performance on all stakeholders. Yeah. And on the other hand, there's also, of course, coming a very far-reaching disruption in terms of companies becoming sustainable, because we have no choice. Companies have to become more sustainable. But with that comes also a huge opportunity,
right,
with all the investments that are going to be put just to try to get us to stick to the 1.5 degree target. Some $100 to $150 trillion needs to be invested over the next few decades. But as an investor, it's of course not easy to make assessments on how
making the right investment decision.
Exactly. So maybe because we have all these terminology flying around with ESG and SRI and impact investing. Maybe start from that. Could you sort of talk a little bit about your perspective from that?
Yeah, I would say when I first got exposed into the impact investing world and sustainable finance, I was overwhelmed by how many acronyms there were, the whole investment lingo, and really looking at kind of how institutional investors would make a decision based on all these portfolio theories and different risk and return factors. I would say having the different frameworks is really important for people to accurately kind of describe what kind of impact that they want to create, and it helps the investors to make the decision that they want to. And I would say everything is on a spectrum. So some investors are more finance focused, so then it's investing with impact, whereas other investors are more on the impact side, so they're investing for impact. And so depending on where you are on the spectrum, you would also use different kinds of frameworks and metrics. On the ESG versus impact side, I would say ESG is definitely more on the finance side, so that you can report the environment, societal and governance metrics around the company. So any company can adopt ESG framework. Every company has impact on these areas, so that you have to report your environmental data, your footprint, your social data, your inclusion, your human policies, and also governance. And however, on the impact investing side, you mentioned SROI, the social return on investment, that is using financial proxies to measure what is your actual societal impact. So, for example, if you're making impact in healthcare, how much money did you mitigate from the government's healthcare budget? So you can use that as your financial metrics and actually say every real dollar you invest into this company, you actually get 3 social dollars back because you're actually helping mitigate social costs by creating these social services and products. So I would say these are kind of different frameworks that you can use. And B Corp, of course, I would say kind of sit nicely in the middle or a little bit to the financial side because every company can become a B Corp. In a way, it is similar to ESG, but I think because there is a centralized body to certify the 5 dimensions of a B Corp, I think there's a lot of talk about comparability between different metrics. So different ESG providers can score the same company with very different scores because they have different materiality metrics, and also some look at the whole supply chain and some only look at the product. So I would say B Corp, because it is centralized, then it gives everybody the same playing field. That as long as you have looked through the B impact assessment and you agree with it, then it becomes something that's comparable across industries.
And I guess that's because there's no golden standard for ESG, like you said, you have to, different companies report different ways. It's a self-reporting mechanism, and it's very valuable and it's absolutely necessary, and it is widely used. But what you're saying is the difference is that since you have one standard and one auditing and certifying body, then it becomes comparable over different industries. Because you mentioned also, when we talked before, or you said it now as well, that of course, I think you said that impact investing is looking at the social return in different areas. It could be in the healthcare sector, or it could be in other...
In education, in well-being, etc.
Okay.
Yeah, that is also... I think the SROI framework is an attempt to also compare across different industries by using the financial proxies and the dollar sign. But I think some also found that you can only use the same SROI in the same sector. So all healthcare companies can compare against each other, and all education companies can compare against each other because they're using the same financial proxies. But kind of, can you shift from education to healthcare? That's also a question.
Yeah. And I mean, so coming back to these other tools that are available, or the frameworks, the self-reporting. I mean, it at one level it is absolutely necessary. At another level, how reliable are they? I mean, from an investor's perspective, when you look at these different frameworks, because it is self-reporting, so best case it's right, worst case it could be something that is, or best case is actually subjective, of course, and worst case it could be greenwashing, or that you really try to trick the system by reporting. How do you navigate that as an investor? Those different.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, though the data is provided by the company, but there is third-party accreditation and also auditing of these data. I would say there is the disclosure part of it, but then there's also the business strategy. I think as an investor, it's definitely more important to look at the strategy, whether they actually go beyond reporting to say, okay, these are where we are, but where do you want to go in the future? And do you want to improve your ESG scores? Do you want to improve your B Corp scores?
Yeah.
Do you want to improve your SROI scores? So it's very much the business strategy. I think as part of B Corp, there's also the impact business model.
Yeah.
Right. So that means whether your service or your product actually creates more impact as you grow and scale the business. So I think as an investor, you should look at not just where they are in the current picture, where they want to be. By serving new markets, by serving new beneficiaries, and can they actually grow that impact as well?
Yeah. Okay. So it's really, in a way, it's looking at their core purpose and how they are delivering on that corporate purpose. Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. At the moment, when I mean, I guess you are not a direct investor, so you don't invest directly into different. But with intermediaries, because B Corp in Hong Kong is quite new, and not that many companies have yet been certified here. And globally, I think there are about 100,000 companies that actually use the framework for assessing, but actually the level for certification is
quite rigorous.
It was quite rigorous.
Yeah.
So only 4,000 plus have certified. I mean, what do you see? How do you see this assessment tool in the Hong Kong context and the investors or the different funds that you are involved with? I mean, how appropriate and how hard is it for them to start using something like this?
It's interesting. In the investment community, the B Corp is not as commonly referenced in investment decisions. They use often like SDGs. So kind of what kind of SDGs are you contributing to? Are you a signatory of the PRI and GRI and other SASB, other frameworks for larger companies? And for earlier stage companies, they kind of hold. It depends on the fund. So if it's a climate focused fund, then they have all the different climate metrics, so such as like air pollution or carbon sequestration, etc. And if it's a social fund, then it's about like jobs provided or education, kids that are able to go to school. So, but for B Corp, I think it would be an interesting start because there's no argument about it, right? There's one certified body, and then you can, of course, just make the decision based on how high they score on the BIA and also what industry they're in. So I think that's definitely something that earlier stage companies and also middle-sized private equity funds can also look into, because I think for listed companies, I know in Asia, there's O-Bank that's listed in Taiwan that's certified as B Corp. But otherwise, I think there are very few listed companies that actually have successfully gone through the whole B impact assessment. So I would say for startups, you can, even when you're starting a company, you can get B Corp pending, right? If you're a company that's less than a year in operation, or in a few years, you can. It's easier to start now. And we actually went to Taiwan to visit 13 B Corps and learned why they became certified, right? They felt that it was actually a tool for them to assess their business strategy and also whether they're benefiting different stakeholders as well. So it wasn't just a certification like a stamp, right? But it was actually helping them to progress in a certain direction. And also the community of B Corps actually supported each other as an ecosystem. So I think that's quite unique. Right now, I see the development kind of happening on parallel to sustainable finance and impact investing, like B Corp. But I think there really should be more synergy and how investors can look at B Corp as a standard that's certified by one body. So it's easier for SMEs to adapt and adopt as well.
Yeah, because it's you mentioned it before as well, and since I'm not an investor, not in the investment world, to me a lot of these, like we started talking about, these abbreviations are kind of academic or slightly just technicalities. We have a massive challenge to address the climate crisis and biodiversity and all these social aspects. So it doesn't really matter what we call it as long as we get the job done. But I get a sense sometimes that we get a little bit lost among all these abbreviations and tools. So I mean for you personally, going down the path. I mean, however you're going to develop your business, do you see that as a potential investor or an intermediary in the current role? Do you see that B Corp certification might be something that is interesting for you as a platform? Or?
Right, for sure. I would say in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong context is that the social enterprise label or category feels very much more on the charity and impact side.
Yes.
So, and the impact investing and sustainable finance seems more on the finance side, and the two communities aren't really talking to each other and connecting. So, being a B Corp, I think, would be a good balance between the two, and also it well positions us as really we are a for-profit company, for-profit platform, because we want to have companies that can have self-sustainable business models, but also deliver social impact at the same time. So being a B Corp, it states a clear positioning on where we are, that we are for purpose, we are for profit, and we want to grow the community in a sustainable way. And I think having the B Corp certification more accessible to more people, easier to understand, a quicker assessment process online. I see that, it's become more streamlined. And having that as more accessible would help, I think, the whole movement for business for purpose.
Okay. Just add to the audience here that in order to be at all eligible for B Corp certification, you have to be a for-profit. So that's why you raised that one point there. I mean, we talked about this sort of standardization, and I mean today then as well, when it comes to a standardized way of making these assessments with the different tools and of course the capabilities of a company to do, say, other reporting, self-reporting and so forth. With the pandemic that we're going through at the moment, where it's going to be harder, even if you get a very expensive external consultant in to help doing this reporting. I mean, how do you see this? How do you see the need for more of a standardized approach when you can't travel and visit? And I mean, because we don't know how long this is going to go on, especially here in Hong Kong and maybe China. It looks like we're sort of digging in for quite a bit of time here.
Yeah, I think that also references kind of the due diligence process. When an investor wants to invest in a company, right, you have to go visit their office and visit the factories and talk to the different stakeholders. And I think right now the due diligence is either hyper-localized, so that you can actually look at only deals in your city and your region, or I think having B Corp as that standardized framework can help expedite that process, so that actually all the startups and the companies already, by submitting to the BIA, already have all the due diligence materials ready for the investors. And so I think that actually can help expedite the process, so that everything, even if it's across the region, you can have those materials ready. And it gives the investor some confidence that someone else internationally accredited has looked at your material. But of course, I wouldn't say you can completely replace the due diligence process, especially on the financial, the growth. But I think in terms of the well-being of the staff, the community, and the governance, all of that is covered in BIA. So I think that really can help the investors.
Yeah. I mean, that is interesting because you see some of the large institutions, companies like BlackRock, how they are describing, how they are looking for different indicators. If a company is got their offices in a LEED certified building, then that means that they are probably or usually also quite sustainable in their approach, etc. So they use these kind of proxy KPIs for indicating how a company, how sustainable and ultimately how resilient they are. So it's a bit of a roundabout way of doing the assessment. So standard, once again, would be quite important.
Right. But I think there's different materiality, weighting for different metrics. So it depends on what the investors find important. So if they find, if the majority of the business of a company is within an office building, then of course being in a sustainable building is important. But if the majority of your work is not in the building, then that's not a good indicator. So having, but I think I also appreciate the transparency of the BIA. I think a lot of the ESG scores sometimes can be quite mysterious of how they generated that score. And so having BIA, it's everything's transparent, so you can see all of the metrics and how high they scored. It's quite important.
So one thing is to look at companies that have certified, and clearly if you're an investor or if you're a customer or a partner, whoever you are in the ecosystem, and you see companies that have been B Corp certified, you know that they are performing to a very high level of standards and rigor. So they already give that off. But of course, say for the most of the companies that are not at that level yet, how difficult do you think it is for them to start using the assessment platform? It's like you said, it's an online platform, it's free, etc. So, but how difficult do you think it is, and how useful do you think it is for them?
I think the online assessment is quite useful. Online it says it takes about 2 to 3 hours, so you have to really sit down, dedicate yourself to that. Probably the founder would be the best person to go through it. You know the most parts of your business, so you can actually get an approximate score of where you can be. I would say from my interviews with the companies in Taiwan, they felt like it was a whole company effort. So everybody needs to be on board. Operations, marketing, human resources, business development, sales. Everybody needs to be on board of why they want to become a B Corp. Because otherwise, it can take up to a year on the process of getting certified. But the fastest I heard was 2 months. Because everyone was on board, everyone knew what they wanted. And of course, I think the business also prior to the assessment had measured all of that impact and have that data ready. Yeah. So it was a lot easier for them to start. So I think actually internal buy-in is the most important part to all of this, to whether you want to do SRI, whether you want to do ESG measurements. You have to get the whole team on board in order to kind of get that process going. But I've heard great stories, that by going through this process, it actually helped the whole team realign their purpose of why they want to work for the company. What do they want to do? What's their mission? Yeah.
Okay. Did you meet any investors that are using it in Taiwan, or?
They had, I would say, some of the companies, of course, had private investors as well.
Yeah, okay.
And they, as using B Corp as a framework to report to their investors, like what they were, how they're performing, and etc. And every 3 years they have to renew.
You need, recertify.
Recertify the process. So I think that was also a good engagement process to say, we're looking at the data again and how they can be improved. Yeah. But no, not directly to investors, but I think that definitely it becomes a great tool for communicating the impact as well.
Yeah. I mean, that is maybe one aspect that is also quite different from self-reporting, because you have to comply with a set of rules. But to do this benchmarking, where you benchmark yourself and you look at how you're going to improve, not only against the rest of the industry, but also against yourself. I think that's
over time.
Over time, exactly. Okay. Well, I don't think we have an awful lot of time here today, but I'm really grateful for the time that we had, and it's been really, hopefully, good for the audience to get a little bit of visibility of what the B Corp assessment framework is. And like you said, it is there as a free online tool. I mean, you just go to the website, right, and register. I would say just a note to add on the B Corp assessment framework. It measures both the operational impact and the impact business model, right? So I think that kind of able to combine both ESG and impact in one assessment. So I think having that tool is a great holistic overview for the companies to look at where they want to go in the future as well. Yes. And coming back to, I guess, the huge opportunity and the transformation and the disruption that is awaiting companies. It is, how do I transform into a sustainable company? How do I become innovative in terms of business model? Because then it's about innovating your whole business model. And like you said, operationally as well as where do I want to create impact? It's a great go-to place to find that kind of information to really start getting things going. So I guess that's something to encourage people to do. It is a really good way of going from wanting to do something, having an intent to really putting things into action.
And it's applicable wherever you are on the spectrum, whether you don't have to be a social enterprise to become a B Corp. It could be any company that has a mission and purpose. So. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Well, thank you very much for the time here today, and I hope you enjoyed our session. And
feel free to reach out.
Yeah. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Yes.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.